Hello, family, and welcome to another episode of Role Model Experts Cafe. I'm your host, Dr. L, the Parent Whisperer, and today with me, I have an amazing lady, Miss Dina Garcia. Did I say your name correctly?
Yep, you got it.
Awesome. Now, I've had this chance to see Dina in our community, and I love how she shows up in the world and her message. So I wanted to ask her to be here and present to you guys her focus and why this should be something that should be on your radars. So Dina, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule for being here, and thank you audience members for tuning in. Please let us know how you got involved with what you do and why this is an important thing for parents to be aware of.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Just to kind of share a quick version of my story, so to speak, I grew up in a household where dieting and body dissatisfaction were pretty normal. And as a result of that, I actually did my first diet in the 5th grade, which is super scary to me because I have a 5th grader. And
wow.
And from there, I think everything just kind of went up and down and spiraled as years went on, with off and on diets and just not feeling good enough and not having a positive body image. And I even, was going into college and picking a major. It was like, oh, I'll study nutrition, because I think there was a piece of me that realized that this dieting just wasn't like a great idea. That I was smarter than that and whatnot. So then as I became a dietitian, these cycles of restriction and overeating actually became more intense. And I went through a significant period where I was doing a lot of binge eating. The more I tried to control what I was eating, the harder it became and the more out of control I felt. And it was just this really kind of downward spiral around food and body image. And it didn't feel great. And that was kind of my, what I call diet rock bottom. I really had never engaged in any crazy diets, really restrictive ones, but I certainly had a diet mindset, I think, leading up to all of this, except for the one time I had to pretty much starve myself to fit into a bridesmaid's dress, because in the 6 weeks between the time I bought it and the time of the wedding, I could not zip it and they couldn't take any of it out. So that was kind of my diet rock bottom. And I said, okay, there has to be a different way to approach this. And that's when I discovered intuitive eating and, really looking at approaching nutrition from a whole different perspective. And I think it's so important for parents, because the relationship with food that we model to our children gets passed on to them. And I would be heartbroken if I felt like my daughter in 5th grade felt like she needed to not eat in order to look different. Like, that would be heartbreaking for me.
Actually, you bring up a really, really important point, in the sense that for most of us, there's these external stimuli and external factors that shape how we think, how we feel about our body, our image. And what you're describing is the actual natural process that I personally experienced myself, that nutrition is something that needs to come from the inside out, instead of being forced upon you, basically, with shame and guilt and all the social media and everything else that comes in. So really, really important thing. And then, of course, like you said, this is something that seems to keep getting passed on one generation to the next. So obviously, this is something that role modeling is a very important component of it. So in doing so, what are some of the things that you have found out that are the typical challenges of the people that come to you? First of all, who typically comes to you with concerns and questions?
Yeah, so kind of the average or the typical person that I work with, some of the things that they share with me before we even start working together is that they're thinking about food all the time. So they wake up thinking about it, they go to sleep thinking about food, and the whole day it's like, well, what am I going to eat next? Or it could even be like obsessing about it in the sense of like, well, I've had this much, now I can't have that. And so, just the constantly trying to control what they're eating.
Right.
So it's that constant thinking about food is like probably the top symptom that I see. And then of course there would be then the binging that could potentially come from that, like having uncontrollable episodes of eating, and then the accompanying guilt and shame that the individual feels afterwards. And so it really just becomes this cycle of what we call eat, repent, repeat. And so I think that's the biggest thing. And then, of course, wrapped up into all of that is body dissatisfaction, negative self-image. You know, we have a lot of pressure to look a certain way. And what has happened with a lot of clients is, you know, maybe years ago, they engaged in different diets, they've lost weight and regained it. And, you know, they've lost 10 and gained 20 and lost 20 and gained 30. And then they lost 30 and gained 50. And it's just been this constant cycle. And now, like, you know, their set point is different. And so there's some grief that they're experiencing around the fact that, like, my body just wants to stay here now because, you know, I've abused it a little bit over the years. And that can be a really kind of tough thing to just cope with.
So Dina, actually what you just brought up, this is important because there is body image and there is social stigma and all of those. And then there is something that is actually medically true, which is health and obesity and things like that, or basically, or psychological stuff like binge eating or those kind of things, right? So where do you draw the line? Where is healthy, basically, or what do we describe as healthy? So
one of the interesting things is, like, BMI charts are really not suited to be assessing the size of the population. So I'm just going to, like, get that out of the way. And ideal body weight charts are very outdated and, you know, biased in many different ways. So I really like to just not even use those.
Okay.
And the best way that I define health for an individual, or what is a healthy size for them, it is the size that their body naturally settles at when they're eating intuitively, meaning they're allowing their body food when it's hungry and they're stopping when they're full, right? They're not eating to this place of discomfort and you know, pain, and that they're eating as healthy as what is reasonable for them, because there are so many factors that impact a person's ability to make healthy choices. There's their income level, just food preferences, accessibility, stress levels, you know, so when we take the shame out of it, right? Like, there's this shame people feel because there's this expectation of how we quote unquote should eat. And then that just makes us feel bad for not being able to live up to that standard. And so we all have a set point, which is where our body naturally wants to stay at. And so, especially if an individual has weight cycled, like I described before, where they lose a little, gain a little more, lose a little, and through that, what we know through research is that set point actually increases. So set point is the weight that the body tries to stay at when you're eating intuitively, meaning eating when you're hungry, stopping when you're full. And so in order to go below that set point, oftentimes an individual has to engage in disordered behaviors towards eating. And so that is not really the safe weight for them anymore. Maybe at one point in their life, you know, just using really round numbers, maybe at one point in their life, 150 was their set point, and that was the healthy weight for them. But now that they've gone through years of yo-yoing, 200 might actually be the safe weight for them. And if there are health concerns, and I've seen this over and over and over again, and seen it in research as well, changing our behaviors can still improve our health outcomes, whether we're focusing on weight or not. So when somebody starts engaging in regular physical activity and eating more fiber and better regulating their hunger and appetite, when they start doing those things, more fruits and vegetables, all of that stuff, there might be a modest shift in weight, but it's likely not going to be this 50, 60 pound reduction in their weight that the ideal weight charts say that they need to be at. But they will see significant improvements in their health outcomes. Right. And that's really, I think, the key that a lot of the medical community has missed. There, you know, there's a lot of bias around weight and stigma around weight. And that doesn't help people in larger bodies to be able to get the health care they need, because when they go into their doctor and they feel shamed about their weight, they're less likely to go and get care. Right.
And you mentioned a really good point. It's the behavior, and actually understanding that, you know, the behaviors add up, meaning that when you make a good choice about something, and I say good as in like in quotes, but when you make a choice that is like having more fiber, that is in itself gonna give you a positive internal response that kind of reinforces more of those types of decisions. So focusing on that aspect would be a lot more important than trying to kind of live up to somebody else's standards, basically.
Right. It's that intrinsic motivation versus that extrinsic motivation. When we're staring at the number on the scale, that's an extrinsic motivator that is temporary, really. Right. Like, we're not going to perpetually stay motivated by that, because eventually it's going to stop moving or move in a direction we don't like. Where when we can learn to be intrinsically motivated by eating this way or having this type of balanced meal helps me to feel good, therefore I want to do it. And I know long-term it's going to help me. I don't need that immediate gratification from it.
Exactly.
That's
So Dina, if our audience members were listening to this and they're saying, okay, well, what's the first step? Or what would be one thing that you would say would be very important, or they could take away from this video that they could start implementing afterwards?
Yeah, so there's two main aspects that I work with clients on. There is like the practical side of what to eat and making sure your physical needs are met regarding food and sleep. And we talk about all that other stuff too. But and then there is like the behavioral side of things. How do we shift your habits, shift your thinking, implement some intuitive and mindful eating exercises that can help you to detach from emotional eating and stress eating and, that aspect of binge and emotional eating. But before we can work on more of the behavioral stuff or implementing any of that intuitive and mindful eating, the individual first has to make sure that their need for food is being met. Because if we're trying to work on a strategy to be more present during a craving, if they have not had enough food to supply their body with what it needs, it's not going to get out of that primitive survival part of its brain, and it's just going to, be overridden by its need for food. And so step one is always, let's make sure that you have adequate, balanced meals on a regular basis. If somebody's engaged in a lot of yo-yo dieting, or they've been binged ate a lot over the years, sometimes their hunger and fullness cues might not actually be tuned in properly. So we may have to actually eat unintuitively for a little bit to try to retune that hunger and fullness, because a lot of people will tell me, I don't feel hungry until I'm starving, or I don't ever actually really feel full. And so we've got to get those back first. And that requires adequate balanced meals on a regular basis. And I use the acronym PF: protein, fiber, fat, and fun. That's what we want.
That's really cool. I like that. That's really important. Let's repeat that: protein, fat, fiber, and then what was the last one?
Fun.
Fun, yes.
The most important.
Yes, exactly.
To feel satisfied from what we eat, it's not just about feeling full. I mean, that's helpful, sure, but it has to really hit the spot, or else we're going to be like seeking out other food because we don't feel satisfied, or we're going to be deprived. So we want to have that fun component.
Yeah, I can definitely tell based on that order. Protein a lot of times helps people make better decisions about what they're going to eat, because it kind of gets away that starvation. Like they feel like, all right, well, I have something in me. I'm not about to die or faint to go for the nearest fast food restaurant there, basically. Is so you make better decisions. The fat gives you that feeling of fullness, that's satisfaction.
Right, and you stay full longer when you consume some fat.
So you have that lack of crash. And then, of course, the fun is definitely important. And then fiber is also the same thing, that feeling of fullness, and then also the slow digestion. And also your gut will function a lot better when you have the fiber too. Absolutely.
And with certain types of fiber, we can even have what's called a second meal effect. So as the fiber is passing into the lower digestive tract, the good bacteria are digesting it and producing short chain fatty acids that actually help us to feel more satisfied. So what we ate at breakfast can then impact how full we're going to feel at lunch.
Really cool. I really love the science behind that. That's very cool. Awesome. And I know that there is so much more when it comes to this kind of stuff. So how can people connect with you and find out more and gain support? Actually, that's something that is really important when it comes to your nutrition.
Yeah, absolutely. So I do offer a kind of what I call a free download. It's called The Most Critical Step to End Binge Eating, which really applies to binge eating, emotional eating, or anyone struggling with chronic dieting and a healthy relationship with food. But you can go to my website at dietitian-nutritionist.com and then just put in /end the binge, and that'll take you directly to the page that has my free download.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for that gift. And this has been a gem. I hope that our audience members really take advantage and really listen to this maybe a second time just to
Yeah.
get those little nuances. Those are really, really important points. Very cool. Awesome. So guys, I'm going to put all the links, all the details of how to connect with Dina in the chat, in the description box. Make sure that you check it. A lot of times when it comes to a healthy lifestyle, the community and the support is equally important. It's knowing that there are people who have your best interests at heart, as opposed to marketing and things that will produce money for some big company, that they actually want to see you happy and healthy, leading a full life. So it's important for us not only to reach out and look for the support, but also to teach our kids how to do this, basically role model the behavior that you don't have to do everything alone, that there are people out there that want to support you. And Dina is a perfect example of this. So if you haven't already done so, also make sure you click subscribe so you get the latest notifications on all the experts that come on the channel, share expertise, and in this particular case, gifts like Dina has given you, very generous. And before we finish, Dina, any final words for our audience members?
Oh gosh, I would say, one of my favorite quotes around eating comes from Michelle May, who's one of the founders or has written a lot about mindful eating, which is eat what you love and love what you eat. We feel so much fear and pressure around eating, and it really sucks the joy out of it. And, getting to that place of joy, I think, is really important. And then if you do go take advantage of my free download, on that page, there's also an option to join my Facebook group, and I have like dozens and dozens of free training videos. So lots of great resources there too.
Awesome. I love it. No starvation needed. That's very cool.
Right. Yeah.
So very cool. Awesome. Thank you guys for tuning in. And thank you, Dina, for being here and sharing this really, really important topic. Health really starts with nutrition. So I'm really happy that you're addressing this from an inside-out approach, from a psychologically based approach that, there's real science behind it. So I really appreciate it. And we look forward to seeing you guys on future episodes as well. Cheers.
Thanks for having me.